What's going on, guys? This is Brian from Quantum Motorworks bringing you another tutorial today. This one right here, we're going to go ahead and be checking out the fuel pressure on our 2006 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10R. The issue that we're having is we pretty much did all these modifications to the bike, and getting ready to turn it on, bike does not want to start. So pretty much got everything else hooked up and bike still doesn't want to start. Now there's a lot of ways we could go about this. From my experience, I've already checked the compression. The compression was good. We don't have an FI light, so no active codes. The only thing that I am noticing is I don't hear a fuel pump priming. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're gonna go ahead and dive into checking the fuel pump. There's a couple ways to do it, and to kind of go in a direction of, is it a fuel pump or a wiring harness issue? We'll be able to determine that by doing some simple tests with the voltage meter, and then we can also do a physical inspection and see if if the fuel pump's working. The other thing we'll be doing is we have a used fuel pump here. This is provided by the customer. Supposedly this fuel pump should work. So before we go ahead and dip into it and install it, we'll go ahead and do some basic measurements, electrical measurements, before even installing the fuel pump, to see if anything right here is checking out. We can go ahead and compare those values from our used fuel pump to our, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys, this is a known bad fuel pump. I already did my test, checked everything out. Fuel pump on this unit is not working. So go ahead and stay tuned. We're going to go ahead and get into it. Okay guys, so before we hop into this, we are going to be working with gasoline. So first things first, make sure that your environment is free of ignition sources or open flames. So that means no smoking in the garage, no firing spark plugs or anything like that. So depending on how much gas is in your fuel tank, you may want to try to suck it out first. There's a couple ways to get the gas out. I don't recommend it, but you can maybe even take the cap off and try dumping it out the top side, but then you're probably going to get fuel all over your tank, and I don't recommend that. You can also dump it from the bottom side. It's going to come out a lot quicker. The correct way to do it would be to actually remove the gas from the top. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Got this nice quick fill. And this is what we're going to be using here. We got this fuel pump right here, this external fuel pump from AutoZone, hooked up to a 12-volt battery for a motorcycle. And this is what we'll basically be using here to pull the fuel out. It's the quickest and most efficient way. If it's good fuel, and depending on how much you have, you may want to put it back into a fuel container. Since I don't have that much, I'm just going to put it into this clean clear container here, and that should be good. Okay, so this is pretty much our setup right here. We got our 12-volt battery, our fuel pump, and our line, and all we got to do on our setup right here, I got this nice switch wired in. I just hit this switch and we can start pulling fuel. This is going to be the best way to pull the fuel out of the bike. It's by using an external pump. Alright, depending on how much fuel you have in the tank, just keep an eye on your container so you don't overfill it. About halfway. Oh, looks like we're almost there. Starting to get bubbles. Sticking in a little bit deeper, so she said. There we go. Almost filled up there on the container. Looks like we found another deep spot. Keep pulling fuel, keep pulling. Looks like we're about to be filled up there. And that should be good. Alright, cool. Let's go ahead and pull this out. So So there's probably still going to be a little bit of fuel left in there, but it's not going to be as much as there, you know, obviously this whole container. So it'll be a lot easier to go ahead and pull that out and empty it. And then we'll go ahead and cap off our gasoline. Boom, and here we go. Nice. All right, go ahead and put our cap back on. Okay. And so the next part, after you go ahead and pull out the fuel, there's a couple things you'll want to do. Obviously, we have the bike still disassembled. You want to remove the seat, the side panels here that covered the gas tank and the seat, and then that'll give you access to this 10mm bolt here. And then before you take out this 10mm bolt, we're going to want to pay attention to the top of the triple trees here. So your steering stabilizer, this bolt, you're going to need to remove that and put your steering stabilizer out of the way. I recommend laying a rag down so you don't scratch your forks or ignition or the steering stabilizer itself. And then the steering stabilizer bracket, which it mounts to, you're going to want to remove those 2 screws there, and then that'll give you access to go ahead and lift the gas tank. Another fancy tool, this is a gas tank stand right here. Comes with most Suzukis, and a lot of sport bikes will come with them. We'll go ahead and use this right here to basically prop the gas tank up. Gas tank's now empty and pretty light. And we'll stick this in the hole. All right, boom. So now we're locked in. So I've already kind of taken this apart and haven't really connected everything, but you have 2 vent lines right here. These go to your charcoal canister. Not super critical. On a non-California bike, you won't have these. This is a 49 state bike, so you're gonna have these 2 vent lines here that connect to the gas tank right up there. As you can see, there's 2 of them. And then this is your actual drain line, if I'm not mistaken. Say if you're to overflow your gas tank, this is going to drain out here, and that's going to go down to the bottom of the bike. So we'll go ahead and leave that disconnected. Those 2 we obviously got disconnected, and then we'll come here to the fuel line. And basically this is our fuel line, and this normally be kind of pushed on a little bit more, and then this red clip right here will be pressed up. There we go. It's a little tight. So that's basically how it would be. Take a small flathead screwdriver and carefully pry this red retaining clip down. And then once you do that, on certain fuel pumps, there's actually 2 clips or 2 buttons that you have to depress on either side to remove it. On this Kawasaki design, you don't have to. Just carefully pull it off. Boom. And that's pretty much it. You can snap that ring back and that clip back in place so it doesn't get lost, or just leave it how it is. And then that pretty much gives you access to the fuel pump. Now if we're to come over here, make sure obviously that our electrical connector here on the fuel pump is connected. And then if you're skeptical, so then what you could do at this point, if you're skeptical if your fuel pump was working, everything, the electrical plug is connected, fuel lines disconnected. Pretty much go ahead and put your kill switch into the off position, then go ahead and turn on your ignition. And then I would get like a cup, if you could even connect like another clear hose to the end of this fitting here and then run it into a cup, that would be best. But we're just going to do this for safety, just in case it just so happens to work, but I don't think it's going to work. But then at this point you would go ahead and hit the ignition to the run position and then see if any fuel comes out. Nothing. Nothing's coming out. So obviously this fuel pump isn't working right now. Not saying that the fuel pump's bad, but we're going to go ahead and do another test right now to actually see what's going on. So we can go ahead and turn our ignition off. Okay, so at this point we're going to go ahead and come to the left hand side of the bike. Still got our fuel pump disconnected, the electrical's connected, got the fuel tank propped up so we can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and disconnect this electrical connector using our flathead, our small flathead screwdriver. There's a little clip underneath here. You want to just carefully pry that up a little bit and then pull on the plug. It's a little tight here, and it should pop out like that. So then we can go ahead and do 2 tests. One, checking the actual fuel pump, And the other test, checking the actual wiring harness. So the next thing you want to go ahead and do to get this off right here is if you're looking at the connector on the right hand side or back side of it, there's another little tab. You take your flathead screwdriver and kind of pull up on that tab a little bit. You can hear it. Pull it up and then slide back on the connector, and boom, connector comes off. There's basically a little clip, little protrusion where this connects to. So now we can go ahead and check to see our readings here from the wiring harness. Okay, so we got 3 wires here on the fuel pump connector. This is the connector that's actually connected to the fuel pump. Looks like we have a red wire with a black tracer, and this is kind of deteriorated and been spray painted over. And then we have a gray wire with the white tracer and a gray wire with a yellow tracer. So let's go ahead and see what we got. We can also kind of cheat, and if we look at the other side, we can already kind of figure out, depending. If we look here, we can kind of cheat, and we can see here, looks like the black and the red is going to probably, either the fuel pump itself or the fuel level gauge. And then there's also a gray, looks like it's the yellow, and then this right here looks like the gray with the white is the ground. So just cheating right there, we already know the gray and the white, that's going to be our ground because it's connected to the body of the fuel pump. You're going to need a 12-volt meter. And for this side, if you have little pins to get in there, that'd be best. If not, you could also do it with your traditional. Just have to be careful you're not touching them, and don't force them inside the connector, you'll damage it. But basically we're gonna go ahead and check our meter right here. So we're gonna be doing a continuity test, and basically we just want to see if there's any continuity. Okay guys, so we're going to go ahead and check the ground now and make sure that we have a good ground in our pump. So that's going to go ahead and be the gray with the white tracer. Go ahead and connect it there. We're just checking to make sure we have a good connection. Basically, if you touch the fuel pump, you should have a good ground. So you can see there, if we have a good ground, that means the continuity, the signal in the meter passes through the wire in the connector to the fuel pump housing. And then if you touch basically anywhere on the fuel pump or anything that's connected by metal, you should get continuity. So that's showing us that the ground is working on this fuel pump here. So we know that the gray and the white, that's going to be our ground. So we'll go ahead and stick one end right there. It doesn't really matter which end of the black or red, you'll get the same reading regardless. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and check. We'll go ahead and check this red, or this black with the red tracer. That's going to be this upper one right here. And looks like I don't have any type of continuity. We can go ahead and range through it. Oh, actually we are. Hold on. So let's see. So if we go to the 2K range, when we're checking the gray and the white to the black with the red, we get about 1.5 ohms. So I'm assuming that's going to be for our fuel level switch that's inside the fuel pump. And then if we go ahead and leave the black one connected to our gray and white, and then go to the other one beneath it, which would be the gray and yellow tracer, if you put this on continuity, you should get continuity. If you have your buzzer on, it should be beeping, or you should get some type of value here. So that right there is telling me that this fuel pump having no continuity, it being open, showing basically infinity ohms, that means that the coil inside the fuel pump is probably shorted out, and hence that's why the fuel pump's not working. The fuel level gauge or fuel level switch seems to have continuity and is working. We can go ahead and verify that ohm reading, the 1.5 and the 2 1000 range, 2K range on our meter. Your meter might be a little bit different. It might be mine's a manual ranging with the switch. You might have an automatic type. So, but regardless, if you're getting some type of ohm reading, that would basically tell you, like, you know, that there's resistance and the coil's intact. Having no continuity or no resistance on those two wires, which are for the fuel pump, telling me that basically the windings or coil on the fuel pump are shorted open, or basically the wires actually disconnected. So that's why we don't have a complete path of signal, you know, and you would see that on the meter. Okay, so let's just go ahead and recap the fuel pump wiring. The black with the red tracer, that's going to be the fuel level switch. We were getting 1.5 ohms, so that lets us know the fuel level switch is working. The gray with the white tracer, that's the ground on the pump. We just checked that. We have good continuity. Okay, we got the gray with the yellow tracer. That's the fuel pump power 12 volt. That we were getting no continuity, or is basically open. So that test right there failed. So that was the first test. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the second test, and that's going to be to actually check the wiring harness of the bike for the fuel pump connector. So say you did check this and this all checks out, you know, you get 1.5 ohms or something close to that on the fuel level switch, you got a good ground, and let's just say you get like 5 ohms on the fuel pump power side, you know, then that would be telling us, hey, there's a possibility that, you know, we have a good fuel pump, but maybe there's an issue with our wiring. In this particular scenario, we're not going to be able to really cover that because our fuel pump is actually broken, but maybe we can kind of demonstrate that with our used one here, assuming that this one works. So now we're going to go ahead and double check the wiring harness side of the fuel pump connector, and this is going to be our second test. And basically those wires that you're going to see, it's going to be a teal with a black tracer, and that's going to be for your fuel level switch. A black with the yellow tracer, that's going to be the ground and the wiring harness. And then you're going to see a white with a red tracer, and that's going to be your fuel pump power 12 volts. And you'll notice that this white with the red tracer wire is going to be significantly larger in diameter. It's like a 10 or a 12 gauge wire compared to these other two wires are going to be a little smaller, around 14 gauge. So let's go ahead and take a look. Is looking at the connector, we have it like this. We can see right here these wires. We have a white, red, a black with the yellow tracer, and it looks like a green with a black tracer. So if we just kind of eyeball that, we can already kind of tell what's going to be what. So our gray with the white there, that's on this side, that's going to the black with the yellow. And then the gray with the yellow is going to the white with the red. And then the black with the red is going to the green with the black. So for this next test, we're going to want to go ahead and put our meter in the DC volts, DC. Not in the amp. We're not doing amp or a DC alternating current. We're doing a direct current voltage. And then I'm putting mine in the 20 range. That's basically go up to 20 volts. Depending on what kind of meter you have, it might maybe automatic ranging. Now if you put in the 2 volt range and try to do a test, it's not going to work because this is a 12 volt system. So we're going to want to put it into the 20 range. And then the other thing you're going to want to do is when you run these tests, you're going to want to make sure you have a good fully charged battery. So go ahead and check your battery voltage. Go ahead and put the negative to the black to the negative and the red to the positive. And you can see there I got 12.77 volts. So that's going to be good. We should have at least 12.6 volts on this battery in order to get a good test reading. So now the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure your ignition key is off and your ignition switch, your kill, is in the run position. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is identify what kind of wires we have here. And so for this first test, we'll go ahead and do the teal with the black tracer. That's going to be this one right here. So we'll go ahead and put our red probe to that one. And then we'll put our black probe to the terminal just to the right of it. And if you look at the meter, there's nothing. Basically, you want to turn on the ignition switch. and you'll see there that we got 12 volts, and that holds constant. It doesn't shut off. So that's going to be for our fuel level switch circuit, and that's telling us that we got 12 volts constant, which is good because it's constantly checking the fuel level on the bike. So we'll go ahead and shut off the the ignition now, and so that tells us two things right there. That tells us that the fuel level switch circuit positive side is working, and that we also have a good ground. The other way you could have tested that is by putting your red probe in like that, touching it, and then you could have touched the ground side of the battery. And if we go ahead and turn on the key, so we got our positive right there, and if we touch the ground side of the battery right there, you'll see that we get 12 volts too. So that's another way to check it. But checking it from the connector right there, if I touch the ground side, you can see we get that 12 volts. So that tells us that the positive and the ground side for the fuel level switch is working. Now the next test we can go ahead and do is we're going to check this bottom pin here. That's going to be our white with the red tracer. And like I said, this wire right here is a little bit thicker. It looks like it's a 12 gauge wire. And that's going to be because that's going to be the wire that actually powers the pump, the fuel pump, with 12 volts. So this is going to be running, longer. So you want the, the manufacturers to decide, hey, we got to put a thicker gauge wire to handle that constant fuel pump running so they don't get the wires hot. So anyways, we'll go ahead and check there. We already know we got a good ground, so to make it easier, we'll go ahead and just put our black or negative side probe into the negative side of the battery. And then what we can do is, while holding that there, we can go ahead and turn on the ignition switch, and we'll see get some power here. So you see we get 12.5 volts, and then it cuts back out. So what that is that's basically the ECU powering up the fuel cutoff relay, and then basically the ECU shutting off that ground connection to the fuel cutoff relay, and that's what kills the power to the fuel pump. And then if you were to try to start the bike, like if I hit the starter button here, you'll see we're getting power to the to that circuit, and then it cuts off. We get a little bit of power, 12 volts, and then you'll see the ECU will cut it off. So if you're not getting 12 volts on this wire right here, on that white red and that matter, you shouldn't get 12 volts constant. It should only be when you key on the bike that you get that 12 volts momentarily and it shuts off. And then if you're cranking the bikes, trying to start it, you should get 12 volts. If you're not getting 12 volts on this circuit, then that means there's a problem with your wiring harness. In this video that we're making right here, we're not going to be covering that. That's like a whole different troubleshooting operation. But to give you guys basically a hint, I would check the fuel cutoff relay and even check the ECU, because the ECU more than likely is what controls the ground circuit on the fuel cutoff relays. In order to understand what I'm saying, you probably got to have a little bit of experience in electrical troubleshooting as well. So that's it for the most part. That tells us right there that the electrical on our bike is functioning, but we have a bad fuel pump. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is basically remove our fuel tank. We took the fuel out of it, so it should be nice and light, easy to remove. And we're going to go ahead and remove the fuel pump and see what we got going on. Now before we even waste our time installing this used fuel pump into our assembly, we're going to go ahead and run a couple of electrical tests. And the first one that we can do is check to see if the ground wire is working. So that's going to be if we're looking at the connector this way, should see a pin right here. So this black and white, or this gray and white, that's going to be our ground. And then if we touch here, oh, wrong range. Make sure your meter's in the continuity range. So we got a good ground. Now we're going to go ahead and let's check our fuel level sensor. So that's going to be the black and red for the fuel level switch, and then we're going to check the ground, and you can just touch right here, it should work the same. Let's see here, turn to the 2K range, and interesting, do we have a there we go, got a little bit of it's 1.0. Can we turn to the 200 range? No. How about the 20K range? So we got about 1.1 there, so that's a little bit different how that's reading. Alright, and then let's check the fuel pump circuit itself. That's going to be the gray with the yellow. That's going to be this one right here if we're looking at the switch, gray and the yellow, the bottom one on the left. A little touch here. Oh, that's a good sign. Getting a little bit of continuity right off the bat. And touch here to the ground, get a little bit easier. So maybe too high of a scale. Let's go to the 2K range. No, nothing. Let's go to the 200. There we go. Got about 15, 14 and a half, 15. Probably pretty sure it's supposed to be around 15 ohms. So let's see if we got continuity. Should we have continuity here? Okay, so that's a good sign. That's telling me that the windings on the fuel pump coil are working. And so that means this fuel pump in theory should work. The fuel level switch should work. The ground's good. Now the next two tests that we can do after this is we can do a flow rate test, and that would be to actually check to see how much fuel comes out of here. And then we can even do a fuel pressure test depending on how the bike rides. Now if this fuel pump wasn't working and after we did all these tests you put it in, you know, say you do a flow rate test, you just turn it on without, you know, having a gauge hooked up just to see how much fuel comes out, and a decent amount of fuel comes out, say a little bit of fuel comes out, and the bike runs and it runs good without a load on the engine, and then you're like, oh yeah, this thing runs great, and then you know, take it on the freeway, and once you get up to 5, 6, 7,000 RPMs, it falls flat on its face and starts running like crap again. That's probably going to be a good indication that our used fuel pump here is no good. And that's just going to suck for the customer because, you know, he's the one that paid for this. I think a new fuel pump, I can't remember if it was 600 or almost $1,000 or 500 bucks. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't recommend really rebuilding these. The parts in here, there's some like fuel pressure regulators. These get clogged up and dirty. And even if you put a new fuel pump, sometimes it'll kind of clog and restrict it and you won't get good fuel pump pressure anyways. So usually the easiest and 100% proof way to do it is to just replace the whole fuel pump assembly with a brand new OEM unit, and then you won't have to worry about anything. So that's that. Now we're going to go ahead and just do a little bit of cleaning up and get ready to pull our fuel tank. We want to make sure all of our connectors, everything's disconnected, electrical connector, our fuel line, and our 3 hoses, 2 vent, 1 drain. And then we can basically loosen up this 10mm bolt here and remove our gas tank and set it on the counter. Okay guys, get ready to pull out the gas tank. We'll go ahead and remove this bolt here. Then with it fully disconnected up front, everything disconnected underneath, carefully lift. Go ahead and set our gas tank over here. Okay, so now for this part, if you don't want to damage the top, you might want to place some rags up here, and then we're going to go ahead and lean it over onto its side. Okay, and then so that exposes the underside. We'll go ahead and remove these 10mm bolts here. To make it easier, we'll go ahead and loosen them up by hand first. Now, depending on how much gas is left in your container, in your fuel tank, you may want to have a container ready. And to speed this up, I'm going to go ahead and use an impact gun. And I don't recommend using this initially. I always recommend loosening them up by hand first, and then if you want to speed it up, use an impact gun. If not, there's a possibility you could strip out the threads inside the fuel tank, and then you're going to need to either repair those threads or buy a new gas tank. So I'll go ahead and use this container here just in case to empty out or whatever extra fuel's in here. And just pay attention to the orientation of this fuel valve. You're going to want it, if we're looking at it right here, it looks like it's almost to the 10 o'clock position. So we'll just go ahead and mark our fuel tank right here. That way we know. And then go ahead and zap these off. carefully pull out our fuel pump. Alright, boom. And this is the original one right here. And this is the used one that we're going to put in. So we can just go ahead and kind of wipe off this surface right here. Looks like not very much fuel came out, and it looks like the inside of our tank's relatively cleaned. Not too bad. I'll just take a little bit of grease right here and apply a little bit of grease to this O-ring. It's not going to hurt anything. Just to help make a nice good seal. Okay, and so we'll take our nice used fuel pump, and remembering the position, go ahead and carefully place this inside. And boom, should go like that. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is put some Loctite fastener. This is a medium strength, high temp, and we're just going to go ahead and put a little bit on each of the threads. And that's because this fuel pump does get hot itself, but it also sits on top of the engine. We don't want to take any chances, so we're going to go ahead and put a medium Loctite, and let's just get a couple threaded in by hand. Okay, last two bolts, put just a little bit of Loctite, boom, boom. Okay, now after you get them in by hand, kind of cinch them down carefully in a crisscross pattern. Okay, and then I would recommend finishing them off by hand. Probably want to use a little bit of a bigger wrench. Okay, go ahead and torque these down. Okay, that's pretty much it. Now we can go ahead and grab our gas tank and put it back onto the bike. Okay, let's go ahead and set our gas tank up. So first things first, let's go ahead and secure it with our bolt here. Alright, don't fully tighten it all the way, but just kind of snug. Shouldn't really interfere with it too much. Then we'll go ahead and take our stand, and I do flip these bushings the other way so they actually hold the gas tank up. So put that there, that goes there. Okay, that gives us a little bit more room. So now we can go ahead and connect our connector here. Boom. Maybe what we could do is pour a little bit of gasoline back in here. So we will go ahead and get a funnel, and we'll actually put this back down for a moment so we can fill her up. So put our funnel up here, take our gas from earlier, and we'll go ahead and fill this bad boy up. And just maybe pour a little bit in there and then double check to make sure none's leaking on the bottom side. Okay. I don't see any gas coming out. That's always a good sign. You can kind of see the mating surfaces of the green fuel pump and the black part of the fuel tank. No fuel seeping. Let's go ahead and just fill this bad boy all the way up. Okay, that's all the gas. Okay, we can go ahead and put our fuel cap back on. Okay. Then one more time, let's go ahead and prop up our gas tank. And once again, this would be another good time to inspect to make sure there's no leaks on your fuel pump. And then what we can do is grab a fuel line here, connect it to our fuel pump. Now this is kind of loose, so be careful. And then what we're going to do is see if fuel comes out of this bad boy. So everything's off. We're going to go ahead and go fire in the hole. Oh, I hear something. Oh, look at that. Look at that poop coming out of there. So this is why, the other thing I was going to say is you want to make sure that you kind of flush it out before you connect it, or all that crud would have just gone into your throttle bodies, clogged up your fuel injectors, would have been all bad. Okay, let's go ahead and keep flushing it. Oh, that looks really bad. But it's working. So that looks like it's actually working pretty decent. If you're to do a flow test, so there's actually like a specific amount of cc's of gasoline they would want you to measure within so many seconds, usually the priming range. So when you turn the key on, you know, it primes the fuel pump for about 2 or so seconds. Within that time, it should fill up so many cc's. I want to say it's about 300 to 400 cc's. And right now we're about 250 cc's, and that's on a couple primes. But obviously we're a little clogged up, so let's do this a few more times and see if we can get it to come out kind of clear. Okay. Let's see. Probably barely getting 100 cc's on that one. That's about 200, so it's about 100 cc's per key. Without looking it up in the book, it's kind of hard to say, but that's looking pretty clear. It's looking pretty decent now. So if you're definitely replacing your fuel pump with the used one, or you just got done cleaning your tank, you're definitely going to want to do this procedure a couple times before you actually connect that fuel line to your throttle bodies and potentially, you know, turn this fuel pump job into a throttle body job as well. But that's not to say that our throttle bodies are already clogged up to begin with. We won't know until we try to fire her up. That's looking pretty decent. This feels a little on the old side, but not too much. You saw we put about a gallon in there, so if customer puts some fresh gas, or maybe I can put some fresh gas if I'm going to take this thing on a long test ride, and what do you call it? Go ahead and flush out this mediocre fuel right here that we're using. But I would say that's probably about good enough. So now I'm just going to get a little bit of grease right here. And I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on the fitting, just so the O-ring kind of slides over. Then we'll put this on all the way, click it. Alright, and let's see. See if there's any leaks. No. No, doesn't appear to be leaking. It's a good sign. Okay, so the moment of truth. Let's see if we can actually fire this thing up right now. We got a fire extinguisher right there just in case. Checking out the fuel system, making sure no fuel leaks, and let's give it a try. Ooh. Damn, this thing is freaking loud. Sounds okay. Let's double check the oil. Yeah, nothing coming out the drain plug. This thing is freaking loud without the mufflers on it. Give it a couple seconds, wait for the oil level. Might have to top her off a little bit. Oh, smoky. So we'll go ahead and take off this cap. Obviously this part right here isn't required for your fill pump, but this is our first time turn on the bike, so kind of double check it, see where our oil's at. We're gonna probably put it just about the halfway because there's still oil in the top end. It's gonna drain down and we don't want to overfill it. Come right here and check it out. Almost about halfway. Looks pretty good right there. About halfway, and then we'll double check it after we run the bike for a couple more minutes. See where the oil lands. Okay. Okay guys, and after you do all that, pretty much you just want to check for leaks. No leaks, go ahead and put your fuel tank back on, and that's pretty much it. We can go ahead and fire her up and see what she sounds like. Ooh, this one's a little tricky because it has no mufflers. Pretty good. Oh, fuck. Our neighbors are gonna call the cops on me again. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. Comment if you guys have any questions. Give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for the next one.